For this assignment, we are going to be using Photoshop somewhat to recreate or digitize a Wasily Kandinsky painting. The painting is called Composition 8. As you can see, it is made up of numerous design elements: line, shape, pattern, contrast, value or tone, repetition, and movement. When I first glance at this painting, my eye is drawn to the top left black and purple orb. This is the focal point or attention getter of the painting. It draws us in, and then we want to explore more of the composition. Diagonal lines move our eyes through various other elements. Shapes are often clumped together to form directional motifs or patterns. As my eye moves to the center right, it is hard not to notice the little black dot that is surrounded by diagonal arrows, which are all pointing toward it. A nice trick to enhance the element of emphasis. Notice the repetition of lines as arcs, and how their different thicknesses or colors help or hinder their vividness. When looking at art or designs, I often wonder how I personally could make various aspects stand out or become more noticeable. Perhaps by simply changing a color of a line or shape, or by making a line bolder or repetitive. Will that enhance or hinder the design or painting? I'm not sure, but this is the kind of conversation you need to have with yourself when you're critiquing or when you're designing. Now, let's learn some more Photoshop tools and gizmos. Alright, so we're going to open up a new Photoshop document, and the numbers for this one are, I'm going to go ahead and change the width to 11 and the height to 8, and we want to have it a landscape format, 300 pixels per inch, RGB color, and that looks good. Alright, so we've got our workspace here. I'm going to go ahead and double click on my background so I can unlock it. Click OK. Now I can directly edit that layer, and I'm going to go ahead and label this layer background. Alright, what we're going to try to do is recreate the Wasily Kandinsky painting composition number 8. So we know that there's a lot of shapes and there's a lot of lines involved, and I think this is a great project for you to become more familiar with some of the basic tools in Photoshop. So what I've done here is I've added a new layer, and you might want to open a reference of the composition number 8 just so that you can kind of see it, all the visual elements in there, but I'm going to go through and show you how to do some of those different things. So the first thing is we want to create that orb, that black, purple, and red orb that was in the top left corner of the painting. And that is not an orb. That is not a circle. We want the ellipse tool. And again, I'm going to hold Shift down and draw this circle so that it's a perfect circle. Got a nice black circle here. I'm going to go ahead and double click on that layer, and this opens up a menu called Layer Style, and there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do with this shape now, or with this layer. And what I'm going to look at is outer glow, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that. At the top here, the blend mode says screen. I'm going to make that normal, and there's a color here, color chooser, and the black orb in Kandinsky's painting had red around it, so I'm going to kind of find a lighter red color here and click OK. And we got gradient here. We can mess with that if we want to. I'm going to cancel that. Spread is how far out the glow is going to go, and you can see the little preview there to the right of what this is going to look like. You can also see the preview actually on the black orb to the left. Again, we're trying to mimic this as best as we can to the Kandinsky painting. So I'm just kind of playing around with the spread and size and the opacity. And once it looks the way you want it, you can click OK. And now we've added an outer glow effect to the black orb. In the Kandinsky painting, there's also kind of a purple circle that's within that black orb. So I'm going to go ahead and do a new color here. Try to find somewhat of a purple. And we're going to draw this circle in here as a purple circle. And that color is pretty close. Go ahead and center it. I'm going to double click on that and see if we have another layer style. This time I'm clicking gradient overlay. A gradient is something that goes from dark to light. So you can see this goes from dark purple to white. And now I'm just clicking on the little tabs of the gradient to change their color or appearance. And you're going to see the little tiny tab down there at the bottoms. You can move those and adjust those so that the light is more forward or more backward. You can also change whether it's a linear gradient or a radial gradient. Radial means it radiates from the center out. Notice that it's dark in the center and it radiates to light. It's kind of a fun tool to play with. So it looks like it's a little bit darker in the center and lighter on the outside edge there. And we'll click OK. That looks good. We're going to go ahead and add a new layer, and I want to label this one triangle gradient. You notice in Kandinsky's painting there's a kind of a light blue sort of triangle that's kind of faded from blue to the background, and I'm going to show you how we can mimic this. We're going to go ahead and go to this tool. It's called the lasso tool. Okay, and basically what it does is you can draw with it and it will select a certain area that you can then either cut out or you can fill. If you don't like it, you're going to see those ants marching. If you don't like your selection, you can go to select and deselect. This is the polygonal lasso tool, and it allows you to draw straight lines to select or cut out something. You notice I'm making this kind of weird, crazy shape here. You see the ants marching there, that means something is selected. Okay, select, deselect if you don't want that. So I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool, and we're going to try to make a triangle here that kind of mimics what Kandinsky did in this painting here. Make sure you're on the correct layer. I'm on my triangle gradient shape layer. And now we're wanting to fill this. So you can come over here and you can hold on the gradient or paint bucket. You're going to see that there's some options here. And we're going to go ahead and do the paint bucket. And I'm going to fill it with sort of a light blue color. And there you can see that it has filled that triangle with the blue. I'm going to go up to select and deselect, so now I've got a nice clean triangle here. I'm going to double click on that layer and we're going to do a gradient overlay because we want this to fade from blue to basically a clear background color. So again, I'm normal blend mode. I'm clicking on, I don't want a radial gradient, I want a linear because I want it to go from right to left or top to bottom. You can change the angle of your gradient using this little toggle switch here. Again, that looks like in his painting the lighter version of the gradient is on the bottom. And change the color. We're going to double click on this little tab here. And we want to pick a lighter blue color. And I'm going to try to make this fade to white as best we can. So you can kind of adjust it, pull it up, and that's looking pretty smooth there. Pretty close. Once you like it, click OK. We can change the angle a little bit. Ooh, that looks nice. Maybe lower the, no, we're going to raise that up. Looks good. Okay, so we got a nice triangular shape. Next thing I'm working on here is the line tool, and you're going to notice that on the line tool there's a fill and a stroke color, and there's also a weight or thickness of the line, and depending on the weight is how thick it is. So if we have a higher weight, it's going to be a thicker line. Okay, I use my move tool, and I'm going to drag this, and on his painting the triangular shape is outlined with a kind of a thick black line. So that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm just trying to mimic that thick bold outline. And using my transform tool, I'm going to kind of position this or move it so that it looks like it's an outline around that triangle there. Go ahead and apply the transformation, and this little line here, I don't need it, so I'm going to delete it. I'm going to go back to my line that I just created here, and I'm going to copy it. So I'm simply going to take this layer and drag it down to the new layer, and look, it says shape 1 copy. And when I use the move tool, you're going to see that there's another line there. So it copied that exact shape. And now I'm basically just going to rotate it and put it on the left side of this triangle here so that it appears like it's outlined. Pretty nifty. Nudge that one up just a little bit more. Alright, so now we've got our light blue triangular shape. The next thing I want to show you how to make is the sort of linear pattern or checkerboard pattern that he uses on the left side of his painting and the right side. So I'm using the line tool, and I'm just using about a 5 pixel weight, and I'm just drawing sort of a grid here. And it doesn't have to be perfect. His aren't perfect. Just going to do some diagonal lines here that crisscross. Again, you can change the thickness if you need to. And now I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool again. I want to make sure I'm on this layer here. You can see all these layers. I've got shape 2, shape 3, all the way to shape 9, and those are all new layers, 1 line per layer. Go ahead and label this layer here grid fills, because I want to add some colors to this little grid here. And using the polygonal lasso tool is pretty simple. You can go ahead and zoom in here. If you want to zoom in, you can do Command and the plus sign, and Command and minus zooms out. But I'm using the lasso tool here, polygonal lasso tool, to just draw in some rectangles here. And then I'm simply just going to use the fill bucket tool, and I'm going to change the swatch color and fill it. Once you have it, you can go select, deselect, or you can hit Command D to deselect as well. It's kind of a shortcut. Again, we're going to go ahead and fill another one here. I noticed that they're not all filled, so we're just going to do some randomness here. Random color. Maybe we'll go with the dark green. probably need to take my fill bucket and fill a few more of these just to mimic that particular portion of his painting. So I'm making a new layer above the gradient triangle shape, and I'm going to label it arcs. I'm going to go ahead and go down here to the ellipse tool, and the ellipse is going to be the basis of our arcs. So what I want to do is draw a circle. Make sure you're holding shift down and it's fill it with green. You're going to notice this is the fill color, and I can use this no sign, and that means no fill. The one to the right of it is called the stroke or the outline, and I can change that color to black, and I'm going to make it a certain thickness here that kind of matches everything else. So again, fill color and stroke color are two different things. I'm going to use my rectangular marquee tool, which is a nice selector tool, and I'm basically just going to draw a rectangle around the bottom half of this circle. Okay. And if I hit delete, it says could not complete your request because it's not directly editable. So what we have to do is go to layer, and we're going to go down to this thing called rasterize and shape. And what that did is it made it so that I can edit this. Now if I hit delete within the selection, you notice that it took half of the circle away. So now I have an arc. Pretty smooth. I'm going to go ahead and double click on the arc, and it looks like it's got a little bit of a glow to it. So we're going to use outer glow layer style. Gradient, and there's just solid color fill. You can change the color of it. We're going to do a little bit of a yellow here, and it's way too large, so I need to lower the size of it. And we can make the spread a little bit softer. That's looking pretty good. You just have to play around with those toggle bars. Looks good. Okay. If I wanted to make the arcs next to each other, basically what I would do is just copy the layer and put them next to each other using my move tool. Notice that we have a brush tool here. I want to show you how we can do a background. There's some different brushes. There's brushes that are solid when you paint with them, and then there's brushes that are a lot softer when you paint with them. And I accidentally made a boo-boo there, so I had to undo that. I'm going to come down here to the bottom to my background layer, and I'm going to put a new layer above that, and I'm going to title it Background Gradient 1. And I'm going to use the gradient tool, which is under the fill bucket. And basically what I'm doing is drawing the direction of the gradient. I'm just clicking at the bottom left and dragging it to the bottom top right, or I'm doing it to the top here and dragging it down to the bottom. Up here is your gradient panel where you can change the different kinds of gradients. I'm okay with this green. If I'm not, I can double click here and change the color. Maybe we're going to go for some kind of a brownish, tannish color. Click OK, and then you can redraw it. I'm going to go ahead and add a new layer above this background layer, and I'm going to title this one Background Gradient, you guessed it, 2. Let's add a different color gradient on top of this one. Maybe it's kind of sort of like an olive green color. And we'll change it to sort of brownish color. We'll draw that on top here. So I'm going to lower the opacity of the top gradient, so gradient 2, just so we can get a variety of colors in the background here. I don't want to lower it too much because I want to still be able to see some of that green and that dark brownish color. That looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and add a new layer above the gradient 2, and this one's going to be called a gradient or background fill color. So my background's got 3 layers on it so far, and let's pick a color to fill it with here. How about a super like a minty green color. Again, I change from my gradient tool to my fill bucket, and we can go ahead and fill it. I'm going to lower the opacity of this green. Again, I'm trying to make just an interesting background with a whole bunch of different colors in it. And next, we're going to go use our eraser tool. So under the brush there, you've got eraser. And here are your eraser options at the top here. It's got the sort of the tip. You've got hard edges, soft edge. I want a soft edge, and I want it to be brush. Opacity, I want it to be about, I don't know, 30%. And the flow's good. And I want the size to be large. So you can see when I move to the right here how large that circle is. That's way too big. I just want it to be bigger than that. Another thing you can use is you can use the bracket keys on your keyboard to adjust the size, larger or smaller. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just start erasing out. You can tell I'm on the background layer, the green part, and I'm just erasing some of that green away just to make this background a little more interesting. I can use this to accent certain shapes to make them stand out away from the background. I don't want to erase all of it, just some of it. And go down here to background gradient 2. I'm on that layer now. Now I can start to erase some of that gradient that was back there. This is going to kind of give me sort of a wishy-washy background that kind of mimics what Kandinsky did with his. It's got kind of a soft sort of airbrush feel. If you don't like one of the things you've done, you can always undo it, undo the stroke. And that's how I would do a background. So again, you're going to try to create Kandinsky's composition number 8. Assignment details should be found in the assignment page under, or I'm sorry, in the module labeled assignment. I recommend saving this document 3 times as a PDF, Photoshop, and JPEG. And remember, you want to submit this to Canvas. If you have any questions, please email me, klongley@iub.edu.